July 7th, 1944. Around 5 a.m. Hakong Ridge, Saipan. The darkness doesn't fade. It explodes. Thousands of Japanese soldiers surge forward in one final, desperate banzai charge. Their screams tear through the humid jungle as rifles crack, machine guns roar, and mortars rip the earth apart. Within seconds, the American defensive line begins to disappear beneath a wave of men willing to die rather than surrender. The aid station is never meant to become a battlefield. Inside, wounded soldiers lie shoulder to shoulder. Some can barely breathe. Others clutch blood-soaked bandages, hoping daylight will bring rescue that is never coming. Standing among them is a man carrying no reputation as a frontline warrior. His name is Captain Salomon. His profession? A dentist. To many of the men who first meet him, he's the last person anyone expects to see in the middle of the worst fight on Saipan. Dentists pull teeth. They don't stop armies. But this morning, every expectation is about to be shattered. Outside the tent, the firing grows closer. American machine gun positions fall silent one after another. Voices call for ammunition. Then, nothing. The silence lasts only a heartbeat before Japanese soldiers burst through the shattered perimeter. The wounded cannot run. The medics have nowhere to retreat. And Captain Salomon faces a choice no military manual can prepare him for. He can flee into the jungle and save himself. Or he can stay, knowing it almost certainly means death. What happens over the next few hours becomes one of the most extraordinary last stands of the Second World War. When the battle is finally over, American soldiers return to a scene almost too horrifying to believe. Bodies cover the ground around a single machine gun position. The evidence tells a story that seems impossible, a story so unbelievable that even seasoned veterans struggle to explain what one man accomplished before he fell. For decades, his actions remain buried beneath paperwork, lost eyewitness accounts, and military regulations that delay the recognition he has already earned in blood. But legends are not created by medals. They are created by impossible choices. The story of Captain Salomon is not simply about how a dentist became a soldier. It is about duty when escape is still possible, about courage when hope has already disappeared, and about one man who refuses to abandon the wounded, even as an entire enemy force closes in around him. But this story doesn't begin on the battlefields of Saipan. To understand how a quiet dentist becomes one of the most extraordinary heroes of World War II, we have to go back. The story of Captain Salomon does not begin with gunfire. It begins in a quiet neighborhood of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he is born on September 1st, 1914. Long before he becomes a soldier, Ben is known as a thoughtful young man with steady hands and remarkable patience. While other boys dream of adventure, he dreams of building a career that helps people. That dream leads him to the University of Southern California School of Dentistry. There, he earns a reputation as a hard-working student who rarely seeks attention. His classmates remember his discipline. His professors admire his precision. Dentistry seems like the perfect profession for a man who believes that careful work and compassion can change lives. By the late 1930s, Ben graduates and begins practicing dentistry. His future appears secure. He has spent years preparing for a peaceful career, and nothing suggests he will one day become part of one of World War II's most extraordinary stories. Then history changes overnight. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor. News of the assault spreads across America within hours. Thousands of men leave their homes to answer the nation's call. Factories switch to wartime production. Colleges empty as students exchange books for uniforms. Ben makes his decision without hesitation. He volunteers for the United States Army. Because he is a trained dentist, he receives a commission in the Army Dental Corps. His official responsibility is straightforward. Keep soldiers healthy enough to fight by treating dental injuries and infections. It is important work, but it is far from the front lines. Many combat soldiers joke about Army dentists. You're one of the lucky ones, some tell him. You'll never have to fight. Ben never argues with them. Instead, he quietly prepares for something more. Whenever training opportunities appear, he volunteers. He studies infantry tactics, learns battlefield first aid beyond his medical duties. and spends long hours on rifle ranges improving his marksmanship. He practices with the M1 Garand rifle, the M1911 pistol, and even crew-served machine guns. Some officers wonder why a dentist works so hard to master combat skills. Ben offers no dramatic explanation. He simply believes that every officer should be ready for whatever war demands. That attitude earns him respect. He never boasts about his abilities. He never tries to prove himself through words. He lets his discipline speak for him. As the war in the Pacific grows more intense, American forces fight brutal island campaigns against an enemy determined never to surrender. Battles on Guadalcanal, Tarawa, and Kwajalein reveal the terrifying reality of fighting Japanese forces. Every island is defended to the last man. Every victory costs hundreds, sometimes thousands, of American lives. Military planners soon turn their attention to the Mariana Islands. Among them is Saipan. Capturing the island is essential. From its airfields, American B-29 Superfortress bombers will finally be able to strike the Japanese home islands. It is one of the most important strategic objectives of the entire Pacific War. But intelligence reports deliver a grim warning. More than 30,000 Japanese soldiers are dug into caves, bunkers, and fortified positions across the island. They have spent months preparing defenses. They know there will be no retreat. American commanders expect one of the bloodiest battles of the war. Captain Ben Salomon is assigned to the 105th Infantry Regiment of the 27th Infantry Division. Officially, he remains a dental officer. Unofficially, like everyone else on Saipan, he is about to enter a world where job titles mean very little. On June 15, 1944, American forces begin the invasion. The sea erupts with naval bombardment as battleships pound Japanese positions. Hundreds of landing craft race toward the beaches under clouds of smoke. The moment soldiers step onto the sand, machine gun fire and mortar shells tear through their ranks. The casualty count rises almost immediately. Behind the front lines, aid stations fill with wounded men faster than doctors and medics can treat them. Captain Salomon barely has time to rest. Hour after hour, he helps surgeons, comforts terrified soldiers, and assists in treating gunshot wounds, burns, and shrapnel injuries. The work is relentless. Sleep becomes a luxury. Supplies begin to run low. Yet every time another group of wounded arrives, Ben is already moving to help. The battle continues day after day, pushing deeper into the island's rugged terrain. American units advance, but the Japanese refuse to break. Every cave becomes a fortress. Every hillside hides another ambush. Then, during the first week of July, intelligence reports reveal something alarming. Japanese commanders are preparing one final, massive counterattack. No one knows exactly where it will strike, but everyone understands one thing. When it comes, it will change Captain Ben Salomon's life forever. Before dawn on July 7, 1944, the island of Saipan falls into an uneasy silence. American soldiers have been fighting for weeks. They are exhausted. Ammunition is running low. Many units have suffered heavy casualties. Yet few realize that only a short distance away, the surviving Japanese commander, Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, has issued his final order. Every man who can still hold a weapon will attack. It will become the largest banzai charge of the Pacific War. Shortly after 5 a.m., the silence is shattered. Thousands of Japanese soldiers rush forward through the darkness, screaming battle cries as they crash into the American lines. Rifles fire at point-blank range. Grenades explode among foxholes. Bayonets flash in the early morning light. The first defensive positions are overwhelmed. The wounded begin arriving at the regimental aid station faster than the doctors can treat them. Captain Ben Salomon works beside surgeons and medics without stopping. Blood covers the floor. Stretchers line every available space. Men cry out for water, for morphine, for someone to help them. Then the battle reaches the aid station itself. Japanese soldiers break through the American perimeter. The small medical team suddenly finds itself on the front line. Despite carrying no obligation to fight, Salomon immediately picks up a rifle, along with several medics. He fires at the advancing enemy while helping move the wounded to safety. The attack grows more desperate by the minute. One by one, the defenders around the aid station are killed or wounded, realizing the position cannot hold. The senior surgeon orders the remaining medical personnel to evacuate as many casualties as possible. Someone has to stay behind. Someone has to delay the enemy. Captain Ben Salomon does not hesitate. He orders the others to take the wounded and leave immediately. There is no argument, no dramatic speech, only a simple decision made in seconds. As the last survivors pull injured soldiers away from the aid station, Salomon turns back toward the enemy. Nearby, the crew of an M1917 Browning heavy machine gun has already been killed. Without waiting for help, he moves into position behind the weapon. The first wave of Japanese soldiers charges straight toward him. Salomon opens fire. The heavy machine gun roars across the battlefield, cutting through the advancing attackers and forcing others to dive for cover. Those who continue charging are met with relentless bursts of fire. Again and again, new waves emerge from the jungle. Again and again, Salomon refuses to give ground. The weapon grows dangerously hot. Empty ammunition belts pile around his feet. Smoke fills the air. Still he keeps firing. His determination buys precious minutes for the wounded Americans escaping behind him. Those minutes become the difference between life and death. Eventually, Japanese soldiers begin attacking from multiple directions. Some crawl through tall grass. Others rush directly toward the machine gun position. Salomon continues firing until the enemy is almost on top of him. When the machine gun can no longer stop every attacker, the fighting becomes brutally close. Rifle fire, pistol shots, hand-to-hand combat. The aid station disappears into chaos. Hours later, American troops finally regain the area. What they discover is almost impossible to comprehend. The machine gun still points toward the direction of the attack. Captain Ben Salomon lies where he made his final stand. His uniform is torn apart by bullets and bayonet wounds. Around his position, dozens of Japanese soldiers are scattered across the ground, clear evidence of the ferocious defense that had taken place there. The survivors quickly understand what happened. One man had stayed behind. One man had refused to abandon the wounded. His sacrifice had given countless others the time they needed to escape. Captain Ben Salomon had entered the army as a dentist. On the battlefield of Saipan, he proved himself something far greater. He became the last line of defense between helpless, wounded soldiers and an overwhelming enemy force. When the battle for Saipan finally ends, the island is secure, but the cost is staggering. More than 3,000 American soldiers have been killed, and thousands more are wounded. The victory gives the United States a crucial base for B-29 bomber operations against mainland Japan, marking a major turning point in the Pacific War. Among the many names listed as casualties is Captain Ben Salomon. At first, the full story of his final stand is known only to the men who survived because of him. Their eyewitness accounts describe a quiet army dentist who refuses to abandon the wounded, even when escape is still possible. They remember a man who asks nothing for himself and gives everything for others. His commanders recommend him for the Medal of Honor, but the recommendation runs into an unexpected obstacle. At the time, military regulations discourage awarding the Medal of Honor to medical personnel whose primary duty is to care for the wounded. As years pass, paperwork is lost, witnesses die, and the recommendation fades into history. Yet the story refuses to disappear. Veterans continue telling future generations about the dentist who chose duty over survival. Historians begin re-examining the records. Military officials review eyewitness testimony once again, and decades after the war, they reach the conclusion many soldiers had already reached on the battlefield. Captain Ben Salomon's actions represent extraordinary courage beyond the call of duty. On May 1, 2002, nearly 58 years after his death, President George W. Bush presents a Medal of Honor to Dr. Robert Salomon, Ben's brother, finally giving America's fallen hero the recognition he had earned on the battlefield of Saipan. But perhaps Ben Salomon's greatest legacy is not the medal. It is the example he leaves behind. He enters the army as a dentist, a man trained to save lives, not take them. Yet when the moment comes, he proves that courage is not defined by rank, profession, or expectation. It is defined by the choices made when fear, duty, and sacrifice collide. History often remembers generals, famous battles, and decisive victories. But sometimes, the course of history is shaped by one quiet individual who refuses to leave others behind. Captain Bayonet. Salomon never returned home, but because he stood his ground, many others did. And that is why, long after guns of World War II fell silent, the story of the dentist who became a hero continues to remind us that the greatest acts of courage are often performed by the people no one expects.